Peace and blessings. This is Jakim from the Hard Talk with Jakim show. Can't get enough of the Hard Talk with Jakim show? You can email us at btom6164@gmail.com. That's bthomp6164@gmail.com. Peace. Peace. This is Jakim from the Hard Talk with Jakim show. You can follow me on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter at The Real Jakim. That's at The Real Jakim. Remember, no punks allowed. Peace. The views expressed at or through this broadcast is those of the individual host and guests in their individual capacities only. The information provided on this broadcast does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Instead, all information, content, and material available on this broadcast are for general informational purposes only. All viewers should contact their attorney to obtain advice with respect to any and all legal matters.
The Hard Talk with Jakim show.
All right, peace and blessings, y'all. This is your man, Jakim Muhammad, with the Hard Talk with Jakim show. Listen, I've got a great guest host today. We got a great guest host, Donyale Hall. We're going to be talking about some real serious stuff. So I want you to go get your pen and paper and make sure that you write some of this information down because it can happen to you. Before we get into it, I want to talk about real quick, Donyale, and Donyale's our guest host today. She's not just a guest, she's going to be a guest host because we're going to be talking about some real stuff. I actually, a couple of years ago, more than a couple of years, about 3 years ago, we had one of my wife's family members was killed right here in Delaware. You probably remember it. Deanna was killed, and it was over a domestic violence situation, intimate partner. But her thing was that she was not the intimate partner. She was the friend of the intimate partner, and she was killed. And we had to go and look at her body, and the family had to bury her in Dover, Delaware. And it really affected a lot of things about how I was feeling about domestic violence. I've even had a chance running with the courts in New York because I had to order protection against somebody years ago. But before we do that, I want to definitely introduce our guest host tonight, and in person in the studio, Miss Donyale Hall. Thank you for coming in, Donyale.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the invite. This is certainly a very important conversation that needs to be had. There's some very serious things that are going on in our family court system that could potentially leave people seriously injured or lose their life. And it's very sad.
You know, when I decided to do this, and when you gave me a call, we know Donyale and us known each other for a number of years now. And I had asked her to be on the show about 2 years ago. And when that call came in, it was just apropos because we had people in both of our situations that were going through domestic violence issues. Now, I know you probably remember that last year I DJ'd, DJ Jakim, I DJ'd for the domestic violence ambassadors up at the Grand in Wilmington. Big shout outs to Dawn Riley. I hope everything's fine with you, Dawn. Give me a definitely. She said, give me a call when you get a chance, Dawn. I had DJ'd for it, and I tried as much to help for the domestic violence ambassadors here in Delaware. But domestic violence and intimate partner violence is one issue. The other issue is how the courts treat it. Now, I'm going to just ask Donyale, without getting into so much of the details, because I know it's ongoing, how did you fare in our Delaware courts? Because I've heard a lot of stuff about the commissioners and the judges. What do you say about that?
Well, my ordeal started back in 2021. I had an incident back on April Fool's Day of all days. It was a very serious issue. My abuser was charged with second-degree felony assault with a deadly weapon.
Wow.
I'd like to say that it was an isolated incident, But I've recently discovered that many people who have been in abusive relationships, it takes 7 traumas before they get to the point to where they are willing and able to leave it. And quite honestly, even though my struggle started in 2021, they didn't end there. For a lot of reasons, we tried to work through some of the things, tried to go through some counseling, tried to do the things that we could to preserve our family and our marriage, and it just didn't work out. And so there were a number of things that happened, some interactions with the courts. The first time that I went and sought a protection from abuse order, I was granted an ex parte. And for those who don't understand that, that means that you can get that on an emergency basis where it becomes effective right away. And then they put on the calendar a hearing to decide whether or not that's going to be a ongoing thing for a certain amount of time.
Now, let me just, so that our viewers understand, the protection of abuse order. This is in New York, we call it an order protection, but here in Delaware, we call it that protection of abuse order from abuse,
right.
A PFA they call it.
Correct.
And this PFA again is just a paper. Am I right or wrong?
It is.
All right. So it has limited. It always does. It has limited. No matter if you call it order protection or a PFA, it has a limit. It's not going to protect you, but it is part of the first step.
It is.
Right.
And also, it's noteworthy that the criminal process happens in one court and the PFA happens in another court. And oftentimes the courts don't converse with one another. And so you end up with protections from one court that you can't get from another. And that's kind of where I fall right now. And so timing is everything. If you don't go and seek this protection from abuse order at the time of your incident, then you may lose the ability to do so. And so in the midst of the trauma of the situation, you have to be able to pull all your faculties together and write a statement that will be in court probably a month and sometimes more down the road. And if you fail to capture all of the information, then you cannot bring it into the court later, even though subsequent things may have happened in the interim. So,
hold on. That's a good point to talk about. So between the court hearings, and we see this all the time. Remember, I worked 21 years of service in New York City Department of Corrections. So I had to deal with court orders and bringing people to court all the time in Rikers Island or Brooklyn House of Detention or Queens House or wherever I worked at in the NYC DOC. And between the court dates, things happen.
Exactly.
And in a lot of cases, the judges, when they hear that, when you walk in, nowadays, like the judges maybe or commissioners may have this type of attitude, here they go again, or here she goes again, when it's an escalating thing. Am I right or wrong?
That is correct. It's absolutely correct. And one of the things that I can clearly identify as a victim, when you go in and you are trying to grapple with what's happened to you, in the midst of that, you're looking for someone who might be able to guide you and tell you how to go about dealing with the courts with your issue. I was completely unfamiliar with some of these things, and as intelligent as I might be with a couple of letters behind my name and all of that, I'm no by stretch of the imagination an attorney. So you really don't understand the legalities of those forms that you're filling out to say, hey, I need a little bit of help here. And so
which have to be done in a timely fashion.
They do.
Again.
And so, you know, with my situation, that happened at the police station. And so the domestic violence advocate that's there in-house. She was kind enough to help me, navigate the process and help me fill out the forms. And those people are also available at family court. So if you go into family court and you say, hey, I'd like to get a protection from abuse order, I have a domestic violence situation going on, they have the advocates that are there in family court that can help you. Now, these are not trained professionals. And so they do, to the best of their ability, what they can to help you with your questions. But just like, your disclaimer was, we can't give any legal advice.
Right. So are most of these people that help you in that regard probably not even paralegals, or, a lot of them may be volunteers. I do not know that. If you know anything about the people who are supposed to help fill out stuff in the courts, send it in the comments. You can also see this on YouTube at Delaware Info Now, 24 hours from now. Send it in the comments, because we want to get to this. This is not a one-off for us. We're going to be back here in a couple of weeks to talk about this again. So I'm going to have Donyale as a guest host again. And by that time, we might have Dawn on and see if we can get some more clarity for people that's going through stuff like that. Now where you're at that point where you're filling out these forms that you're not familiar with, you're getting as much help as you can. Yesterday, when I was on Market Street here in Delaware on Wilmington, the people that addressed me about this particular show that we're talking about, one of the things they were telling me was one of the things you said earlier, that they had a court case over here in criminal court, and they had another court case in family court, and one didn't talk to the other, and there was a whole bunch of stuff. And they also talked about that they were not happy with the judge's rulings in some cases, and the commissioners. Now, I know most of them are, if I'm mistaken, y'all can correct me out there, but I think most of them are appointed. Am I right or wrong?
I believe that is the protocol. They are appointed for a period of time in a tenure. The judges are a little bit different. They get promoted into those positions. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not the expert. This is kind of what I have learned and gleaned along the way. And the problem is that you brought up a very good point, and I know that we're going to get there.
Yes, we are.
But just because you brought it up now, I'd like to say something while it's on my mind.
Well, look at the camera. Let the people know that.
So when you have issues with a commissioner's ruling, or even a judge's decision, the protocols are not clear and identifiable about how you can go and get some recourse. And so I had a situation where in one of the moments, the commissioner had given my children to a homelessness situation.
Oh, no, that's not good.
Based off of a pack of lies. So my abuser was able to go into the courts and file a false statement. And before I let that go, there's no penalty for perjury. So when in
family court?
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. So that particular defense, when he filed that false allegation, I had to hire an attorney. I was stricken with COVID when he did it. The children were down with COVID.
Wow.
The brain fog from COVID is a very real thing. I'm still struggling to be able to bring things to recall and, wrap my mind
collect
around
them. Yes,
thoughts and all of that. So I certainly didn't feel that I was in a position to be able to represent myself with such severe allegations. He claimed that I waved my firearm at him in a threatening manner. There were a number of different things that he put in there that, of course, the court was going to respond to in an expeditious fashion. However, he still had that criminal charge pending for the second-degree felony assault with a deadly weapon in my case. And that same commissioner that had signed my protection from abuse order 8 months prior heard this matter and clearly had no due diligence to even say, well, maybe I ought to use the ability to call both parties in and see what's going on and divide the week in the chat.
To get clarity.
Exactly.
To what's going on.
Well, that clarity cost me $7,500.
Whoa, hold on for a second. $7,500. Now, you know, I'm not a rich man at no stretch of the imagination. And $7,500 would be a big hit, especially if I was a woman and I was raising a family at the same time.
Exactly. It was a terrible hardship for me. I had actually went to legal aid and asked them to for some help. And because he was the petitioner and I was the respondent on this issue, they couldn't represent me. So if I didn't hire someone, I would have been without representation. And I think that's a true tragedy because I was able to do that because I just got a credit card that had a 0% interest rate on it for 12 months. And I said, well, I can pay this off in 12 months. So I was able to retain counsel. But I thought, and all through this very bizarre process, I thought to myself, how many victims find themselves in the precarious situation where they cannot afford representation?
Oh, well, listen, I can tell you right now, thousands of them, thousands. You know, hold that thought, Donyale. And what we're going to do is right now, if you're watching from Maryland or New Jersey, we got a lot of people watch from Georgia, New York. I want you to remember that you can get in contact with us at btom6164@gmail.com. That's BTHOMP6164@gmail.com. We're going to be right back because that was a lot of information, and we're going to take a break, get some water, but I'm going to leave y'all here with the comedian Charlie Newhart. Now, some of you may not know who Charlie Newhart is, or you may have seen Charlie Newhart. Charlie Newhart is a black man who's been in several movies and several televisions, but he also was a victim of domestic violence. And I'm going to let Charlie talk to y'all, and we'll see you on the other side. Watch this video.
A few months ago, I did a podcast talking about how my ex-wife shot me. A clip of that video went viral. Here it is. Now, if you know that story, you know that I was holding our 2-year-old son during an argument. My ex-wife pulled a gun on me, shot me in the forearm. The bullet went through my forearm, grazed his forehead. Then she pointed the gun at my face and squeezed the trigger, and the gun jammed. God protected me. What you don't know is that I divorced her immediately. I got custody of our son, and she did 3 years in prison. She went on with her life. I went on with mine. Quick update, she just got arrested for murdering her boyfriend. It's all over the news. A Georgia woman was arrested years after the body of a man was found in an Alabama shallow grave. Long story short, she found out her boyfriend was cheating, shot him in the head 3 times while he was asleep.
Peace and blessings, y'all. This is Jakim from the Hard Talk with Jakim Show. Listen, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why I'm holding up a law dictionary. You know, a lot of the things that we learned in school were things that didn't even matter. But that would have been something that's part of the curriculum that we should have learned. Because a lot of words that we think in the dictionary mean one thing, but in court proceedings, they mean another. I mean, from signing contracts to being sued to being criminally arrested, all of the big things in your life, they use a law dictionary against you. And most of the time, it's because you don't know what that word really means. So I'm just saying that we need to change our curriculum in the United States in school and focus on things that matter. Peace and blessings, y'all. The views expressed at or through this broadcast is those of the individual host and guests in their individual capacities only. The information provided on this broadcast does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Instead, all information, content, and material available on this broadcast are for general informational purposes only. All viewers should contact their attorney to obtain advice with respect to any and all legal matters. Peace and blessings, y'all. This is Jakim from the Hard Talk with Jakim. I'm here with our guest host, Sister Donyale Hall. And Donyale, I'm glad you was able to get up here with the traffic coming out from the Dover area. We're in the planet of Dunleith. Yes, and we're on the planet of Dunleith. And she's come up here, and we're in person here today. We're talking about some real issues. I see we have a comment. Steve Washington. Big shout outs to Steve Washington. He said great stuff, man. You're absolutely right. And Steve, man, we're gonna have you on the show again, man. You know you're coming up, but we needed to get this stuff down and get this stuff out there. So we're gonna be talking right now about, she was finishing a story, and I think she finished when she was had to pay that $7,500 to the lawyer.
$7,500, yes. And so, you know, the larger picture is that when you have to defend yourself, even against a false allegation, there's a cost to that. And my heart goes out to those who end up staying stuck in their situations. Like I said, you know, the studies show that it's 7 acts of violence that happen before you get to the point to where you're ready to part company. And when you do that, there are a lot of people who are very trapped in their situations, can't financially make their way out. It's been a struggle, and it's been a sacrifice for me to be able to rub a few pennies together to be able to do this. And my heart goes out to those who don't have those resources at hand. And I think about the detriment that we communicate to people by saying you are going to have to stay in your abusive situation because you lack the resources to get out.
You know, I'm going to bring this to our viewers. I have a close family member that's going through that right now. And I've gone through it with other family members. When you come from a big family, I don't know if my viewers know it, but I come from a huge family in Brooklyn. And when you have a lot of ladies and women in your family, you're going to find that there's a lot of abuse there. Now, I'm not saying that abuse don't happen with men. I just showed you a video with Charlie Newhart, and yes, it happens. I told you that I actually had to get an order of protection because, especially if you have a decent job or a decent thing, you had to protect yourself from allegations. Let me just tell you this. The order of protection I got was in the late 80s, early 90s. And when I went to a judge in Manhattan, I don't think I would have gotten that order of protection if I did not have a tape. And, you know, we was using tape at that time. It did not have a tape on an answering machine of somebody calling me 150 times within 4 hours. And if I didn't have that tape of what they were saying, I would not have gotten that. So, I understand all the men out there that believe that the family court system is geared towards doing right by women. But let me just say this. I have found, and this is no disrespect to all the great judges out there. There's a lot of great judges, and then there's a lot of bums. There's a lot of dingleberries out there. I've dealt with them in New York, and I'm telling you, I'm seeing them here in Delaware too. There's a lot of dingleberries that would not go in front of women that tell me they don't want to go in front of a female judge because they're harder on them than anybody else. And it's just the way it is. I don't know why is it like that. I don't know if anybody else has seen it out there. If you have, put the comments in there, but I've seen it for myself. The judges make these decisions. They're appointed. And we talked about this on this show. We talked about this about when Sharpton was here talking about Superior Court judges in Delaware and the appointees and the lack of it. And I'm going to say this, and I want you to hear me out. Just because they're black face does not mean they are there to help black people.
Could you say that again, please?
Just because, she said, Donyale said, say that again. Just because they're black face, that doesn't mean they're out there to help the black people or black community. So just because you're going to get a female judge and you're a female, don't think that they're going to go soft for you, they're going to have empathy for you. They're not. And just because you get a black judge, don't mean they're going to get. I'm going to have one of the one of the Wilmington City Council members going to be talking about an issue on our show in the next coming weeks. I ain't going to tell you which one because we're just finishing the date. But let me tell you what happened. Black City Council in Wilmington have done things against the black community. And it doesn't matter that they're black. We got to recognize that, y'all. The days of us putting black faces in there just because they're black is over. We need competency and we need fairness.
That's right.
That's what we need. So I'm gonna finish preaching. I'm gonna let Donyale talk some more here. But you go in and you have to now pay $7,500 because now they can't, because somebody else makes the allegation, they can't represent you. How many people do you think are going through that hardship?
Sitting inside of waiting room after waiting room throughout these proceedings, sometimes people are in earshot and they can hear you speaking with the advocate. And I can't tell you how many amens I got from just the courtroom on the unfairness, the lack of ability to be able to access the system, to get justice, the heart-wrenching stories of having a commissioner that got it wrong. Mm-hmm. Trying to right that wrong is another process. And from what I understand, in Kent, where my court is, they are short-staffed and woefully behind in the process. And so we were speaking a little bit earlier about, the issue that I had with the commissioner who mm-hmm. had signed that ex parte giving custody and placement to a homelessness situation in the middle of December.
Ooh, terrible.
And so it was January by the time we got in front of the judge. The Delta variant had come out with COVID. I was suffering from it. My children were suffering from it. The courts, who had just become back in session and in person, had to go back to remote and Zoom. And so, for those reasons, it was pushed back. And I spent the entire Christmas holiday just pensive, because at any point in time, an officer could have shown up and taken my kids to a homelessness situation. And that was discovered during the proceedings, that he had been living in his truck.
Wow.
And I was outraged because just before that incident had happened, the police had been at the house because there was a report of an incident with one of our children. The officer left. And of course, I have to point this out because it is yet another flaw of our system. Officers, kindly take your people into a place where they're not in earshot, because I can't tell you how many times I've been in and out of court proceedings, and because of the rulings that have happened, and the threshold for abuse is way up here. You have to be on your deathbed or bleeding or already dead before the courts will do something. We have to do something about that piece too. But, my thing is that sometimes these rulings embolden the abuser, because if I had $1 for every time I heard my abuser say, I can do X, Y, and Z, and the court isn't going to do a damn thing about it.
Right. Well,
it's a sad thing.
When we first started putting the promos out for this show and for this subject matter, I've got a lot of phone calls, man. I believe me, I got a lot of phone calls, and I got a lot of texts and tweets from people for about this, that, and the third, about this situation or that situation. And I'm looking here right now. I don't know her, Lily London. She has something to say. I don't know her. But what I found out is normally when I have shows and these topics are things that need to be talked about, that's when I start hearing from people who ain't doing anything out there to change what is going on. That's when I start here. Let me tell you something. I saw a lot of people, and I think I'm a good discerner of truth. I can tell you, I'm a discerner of truth. And one of the things that I discern is that I can tell when something is not amiss. And it 9 times out of 10, Donyale, when it's not amiss, when it's a lie, when it's all this, when it's just a bunch of garbage, you can feel it in your fiber. I feel it in my vibrations all the time. I was just kidding to the guy on Market Street on 6th Avenue or 6th Street yesterday. I told him I don't really trust people who smoke. And I'm kidding with him, but I'm really serious. Because if we were in business and you smoke, and you know smoking is detrimental to your health, how can I trust you with anything else? I've seen a lot of people, but I don't. It's just the way I am. I'm not saying that everybody who smokes, because I love people. But I will say this. You can tell in your fiber when people are lying or justice. And I say, go with it. Make sure that you go through those. Let me just say this again, and I'm going to get back to Donyale. And Donyale has another great story with this, with domestic violence. If our court systems don't get it right, you put lives at risk. And when you put lives at risk, you can't come back later on and say, maybe we should have done something. Because Deanna Dalton, and y'all can look her up, Deanna, who wasn't part of it, lost her life because Delaware courts did not take this person's guns. And then he went to the school, you can look it up, went to the school and shot his ex-wife, but shot Deanna at another spot. I'm not putting blame on anybody. The blame should be on the perpetrator. The blame should be on the person who did it. But if you see a train wreck, you know it's going to happen. You don't just sit there when you have the ability. That's what you're supposed to have the ability to do. When police officers go to a house and they don't separate the two people who are in a domestic violence and they let the other one hear what they're saying, hear what they do, you're not doing your job right. I'm going to call it what it is. If you do those types of things, I see here in New York, I ain't going to lie to you, I'm going to preach right now. In New York, if you take 30 minutes, 40 minutes to do a job as a police officer and it's something minor, like my next door neighbors across the street having domestic violence issues every week, and yet every time you come there, you put the man in handcuffs, you let the lady do, and then you let him go. Nobody gets arrested. This person says, I hit him. This person says, I hit her. They both said nobody gets arrested. I know that it's not your case, but nobody gets arrested because if I have to arrest everyone, I have to arrest both of y'all. Well, damn, there's something going on. And if you're coming back week after week, there's definitely something going on. Something better should be going on. Before we get back to Donyale and telling her story on there, we're going to see one other video, and this is the Hard Talk with Jakim. I'll see you back on the other side.
The views expressed at or through this broadcast is those of the individual host and guests in their individual capacities only. The information provided on this broadcast does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Instead, all information, content, and material available on this broadcast are for general informational purposes only. All viewers should contact their attorney to obtain advice with respect to any and all legal matters.
Look closely. Does anything jump out? We've been fighting for years in the streets, in our communities, to put black people on Delaware's courts. But the Chancery Court is still all white. When I talked to President Biden, he told me he would put court diversity front and center on the national stage, and he has. But in Biden's home state of Delaware, leaders talk about diversity while nothing actually changes. I've offered to meet with the governor and state leaders over and over with no success. Even the state's Judicial Diversity Task Force refuses to meet with me because in Delaware, who you know still matters more than what you bring to the table. So I'm bringing my message to you, the people. No more talking. We need action. We need diverse courts.
Because when I get on a plane, I don't expect the airline to tell me they have a few bad apples on the flight crew. Or when I go to the emergency room, I don't expect the doctors to tell me there's a few bad apples working in the emergency room that day. And so the citizens of Pennsylvania do not expect from their law enforcement to have a few bad apples serving their communities.
Listen, Sister Donna Bullock, I'm definitely going to shout out to you again. This is the Hard Talk with Jakim show, and we're back with Donyale Hall, and she's telling a ripping story, a tragic story that's now still ongoing. But we're going to get back to her story. But let me just say this. I have always been about consistency, and I know Donyale has been the same way. We've always been about those consistencies, and my priority is the community, and that should be the priority for judges and police officers, whatever, for the community, for the family. I mean, it starts with the family, goes to the wider community. But what I'm going to say now, I want you to write down. Trust the patterns. Don't ever believe what somebody tells you. Trust the patterns. Because a lot of y'all get back, and Donyale will tell you this. She told you earlier, sometimes it's 7 times before it gets through. They'll start coming back to them, and they'll think that we can handle these things rationally as adults. And of course, they'll do it for a couple of months. They'll be rational because they want to be next to you. They want to get access to you. And the other thing that I want to talk to people, when you're in a domestic violence situation, watch who you talk to about your situation. Because a lot of those girlfriends of yours or boyfriends of yours or friends are friends with with the abuser. I just had a young man who, this is Gay Pride Month, he sent me an email and said that he finally found out that the person, all the information he was telling, he wasn't giving it to his abuser, to his partner, but one of the friends was going right back to the partner, telling everything. Watch who you give your information to, especially when what do you say about that, Donyale?
You get an amen from me all day about that. I tend to keep my circle of who I consider friends very small. My kids they laugh and they joke all the time. They said, "Mom, you're famous. You got 5,000 friends on Facebook, right?" So I said, well, those are people that I've met somewhere along my journey, but the people that I would call friend, I can count on one hand.
That is correct.
So I'm very protective of the information that I share. And I actually had a Judas in my camp, a couple. And I wanted to also say this, Maya Angelou, my favorite quote is, when a person shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Don't make excuses. I know there's somebody out there that's watching right now, and you're in a situation and your spidey senses are tingling about a situation. Listen to that inner voice. If you feel like there's something wrong, might be something wrong, listen to that still small voice. I really wish that I could go back to the first time.
Preach.
He had his hands around my throat.
Preach.
And left.
Preach.
But we rationalize for our situations.
Yes, we do. We rationalize.
We figure, it's for the greater good for me to suck it up and eat it.
Yes.
And when you talked about technology, I'm going to tell you that incident on April Fool's Day, that was caught on video. He went out and told a totally different tale. And had my incident not been on video, somebody might have been compelled to believe it.
Yes.
In this last incident, it wasn't completely caught on video, and he was able to twist the facts. And because I did not have my children testify that day, he got over with it. So, you have to be very careful about how you approach the situation. And that most recent incident that I was telling you about, again, I had filled out a paper in October. October. He had just completed 26 weeks of domestic violence classes. And on the 26th week, there was an incident with our daughter.
Wow.
Ended up in the hospital, ended up back in court, back in the system again. I asked for a modification of my PFA from 2021, and I did that in October.
Right.
The matter was heard in January. Did you know how much had changed in 4 months? You can't go back and add all of the additional information. And because I didn't capture everything just right out of a very stressful situation with the aid of somebody who was well-intentioned to help me, but not legally trained,
right,
there were some errors. And because of these technicalities, my abuser has been now convicted of assault for me. He's now been convicted of child abuse. And I am without a PFA because of the technical issues that have went through the court.
Now,
and they said, wait, before you go, because they said, what has happened recently? And I broke down in tears, and I said, this has already happened. This has already happened. What more
needs to happen more
before the court moves? And I feel victimized by the court. But the reason why I chose to tell my story is because, first and foremost, somebody's got to be a voice for these voiceless people that are being emotionally and financially raped
by the
system.
Yes.
And left unprotected.
Yes.
2 weeks ago, he has a GPS ankle monitor. He was probably 103 yards away from my house. And his probation officer was able to see it. But the system, now here's the courts not talking to each other. The criminal court and superior court that convicted him put that language in there that he had to maintain 100 yards. How safe do you think I feel being able to step outside of my door and look down the street at 100 yards with him looking back at me?
Right.
You know, you can't get that corrected unless you go back because the judge put it in the paperwork.
Yeah.
So you're left essentially a sitting duck waiting for what's next to happen.
So again, we have the technology to do the right thing. We have the paperwork ability to do the right thing, but yet they do not want to issue these PFAs like they are gold, when it's obvious that this person needs to stay away from them. And I have been there. I know that 100 yards is not that very far. That's a football field. It's not that very far. It's not far enough for someone not to get to you. Within 50 yards, you're in danger of even just knife attacks. So, you know, as martial arts, you know, all my years of martial arts and all my family's years of martial. In fact, I got my bags over there. You see my punching bag? There you go. But I will say this, that they won't put that in there, that they so reluctant to put order of protections when they are needed. And then we see all the, now you, like I, watch Discovery, we watch ID, we watch 2020, we watch 60 Minutes. You see all of these shows that where these people go and do the right thing, and yet the system lets them down by not dotting the I's and crossing the T's. I see it all the time. And, you know, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have this show. This show wasn't so much, and I wanted you to tell your story, and I'm thankful you for telling the story. Tell it what you're going through. I hate that we even use the word story. This is life. This is real life right now. But when we have appointed judges and appointed commissioners, now I did go on to the state thing, and they said their commissioner, when the commissioner is first appointed, it's only for either 2 years or 4 years. And then if they get appointed again, then it's for 6 years. So it's, Yeah, and of course, you've heard me talk about the Supreme Court, about the ethics thing in our Supreme Court is terrible in the United States Supreme Court. So again, I really wanted to emphasize on the show tonight that we need a change here in Delaware. Now, I guarantee you, if it's going on in Delaware, it's going on in New Jersey, it's going on in Pennsylvania, it's going on in Maryland. We need a change in the court system on how we deal with domestic violence and how we are dealing with from the initial arrest to the if there's an arrest. Remember, that's an issue too. To the initial arrest to all the way to having an advocate in the courtroom so that you won't have to be indigent and have no money and get no representation. This is an issue for me. And this is an issue that we should talk about during this month. Before we go on our last segment, I wanted to talk, when we come back, we're going to talk about a couple of things that are so specific in this situation. Where the court system is here in the criminal case and where the court system is here in the family court, why is there not a blend and not transfer of information? We'll be right back with the Hard Talk with Jakim Show. Peace.
There's always so much sympathy for folks like that. People say, well, I have a cousin who feels that way. She's not so bad. My aunt voted for Donald Trump, and she's a nice person. My mother supports him. She doesn't like his tweets, but she's not terrible. Here's the newsflash. Your aunt, your mother, your grandmother, whoever supports that philosophy, they actually are terrible people. That actually is garbage when you support racism. It doesn't matter how related you are. But we extend humanity to folks like that, and so little humanity for folks who look like us. When you
All right, y'all. Yeah, it's crazy, but I do want to put this on with Dr. Richie, and big shout out to Dr. Richie. So I'm gonna be right back.
Many times when a white male or even a white female is charged, there's an effort to either minimize the charges to the bare minimum or not overcharge at all. But then an African American is charged, black or brown person, there's this sentiment to overcharge them, to make the charges extreme, knowing many of them would not stick, and then making them fight to get those charges dropped. I'm sure you've seen that as somewhat of a routine now in many criminal justice systems throughout the country.
I mean, whenever you have a combination of alcohol, guns, drugs, egos.
Ego is very, very.
Hold on, let's not forget about the two most deadly diseases in our community, envy and jealousy. You have a combination or a cocktail where somebody's bound to get hurt. So what I'm teaching my mentees right now is that there's a such thing as being in the wrong place at the wrong time. When you're in an arena and there's alcohol and things are beginning to escalate, it's time to go. Mm-hmm. It's time.
Big shout out to Derek Muhammad. Big shout out to Dr. Rashad Richie. Those are some fantastic videos in there. The last one I had to do is just real quick. I'm going to talk about in the coming weeks. We're going to talk about Tom Carper saying that he is going to resign. He's not going to run for, and black leadership in Delaware is filming at the mouth to try to get somebody to get there. And our black leadership in Delaware is a three-ring circus. It is terrible. It is, I don't care what party you're part of or what political faction you're, whether I did go to college for political science. I did not graduate. So I'm a poli-sci and I don't listen to any poli-sci people because they're wackos. But I will say this, it doesn't matter what you liberal, our black leadership in Delaware is terrible. Terrible. And not only is it terrible in your state elected house, we got 4 or 5 of them that's great. The rest of them, city council, rest of them. It's even terrible in your civic association, in your HOAs. They are terrible. If they've been in leadership for more than 10 years, they stealing. You can bet to believe that. That's just my opinion from Jakim. So we're gonna finish up with Sister Donyale Hall. I had to put the
right.
black leadership. You know, it's like a 3-ring circus in Delaware.
Well, I think everything has tied and back into politics.
Oh
so,
my God, isn't it?
I mean, it's all a political game one way or the other. And
yes,
you know that I run for office.
And she ran as a Republican. I was a 16th RD Democratic Committee chair for 7 years. I was the treasurer for 3. And we both agree that the black leadership in Delaware stinks. I'm going to leave it right there. And y'all can get at me anytime you want to. btom6164@gmail.com as BTHOMP6164. We have a statement for the dingleberries. We love to put the dingleberries out there. So if you want to get at me, you better be ready. I'm always have one in the chamber. So y'all know my clapbacks are pretty good. So I always got one in the chamber. So, you know, Donyale, from this point on, in your situation and in many women's situation here in Delaware and around the country, we have found that that if there's something going on in criminal court, because it is a criminal matter, let's be honest, domestic violence is abuse. It is violence. It is a crime. So if it's going on in criminal and it doesn't talk to family court, then we have a situation where it's not working.
It's not. And I can kind of speak a little bit to this because my situation has quite a few of those notes in it. The criminal matters that were being adjudicated were in Superior Court. One of those matters had to do with contempt of my PFA. It was a criminal contempt, and it was a lower level felony, and it was because it resulted in an injury. Family court did not have jurisdiction over that matter. And one of the commissioners actually ruled on that issue and undermined the criminal case to the point to where it jeopardized the state's case because of that ruling. I just challenged that ruling, and it was affirmed and upheld as an error. I'm beyond upset. We'll talk about that later because that's something that's ongoing. But back to my original point, when you have issues with any court judiciary, there is no mechanism to complain. And so from my understanding, because they're appointed, they cannot even be fired. So that has got to be changed. You hold my safety, my well-being in your hands. You make a bad decision and I can't hold you accountable. I've been directed from the chief family court judge's office to look at websites where you comb through till your eyes are bleeding. And the only remedy that you really have is to go through a very costly process in the Supreme Court of Delaware, where it's my understanding it starts at $5,000. Now, this last incident, he filed yet another false complaint against me. Cost me another $3,700, bringing my sum total to $11,000 in the last 16 months.
Wow, 11 G's, baby.
To clear my name. Now, this last go round, the commissioner was kind enough to award me my legal fees. Okay, I got a judgment, but this individual has a long list of
collecting the judgment is the other thing.
Exactly. So you've taken away from my ability to pay my monthly expenses because I have to go out and go through a process through the judicial system to defend myself, not even bring the issue that should be front and center, the abuse, and deal with that. I'm defending myself. And because I have been a public figure, what was the end game goal? To run my name through the dirt.
Wow. Well,
and it's a sensational story. So, hey.
And I listen, 11 G's is nothing to sneeze at. And getting that money is important. I know this has been nothing, but during this particular time, I can only imagine how it's been on the family.
It's been terrible. My children are in therapy. I can honestly tell you that because he's made claims about me being mentally unstable, as a military person, I can remember, and I served from 90 to 94.
Uh-huh.
If you went to get any counseling for anything, there was a stigma attached to that.
Oh, yeah. Everybody gonna know about it, too.
Exactly. And so there have been things throughout the course of my lifetime where I've had issues with some of my children. We went through some counseling. I went through marriage counseling for a while. I maintained relationships, but, you can't have those kinds of things be present when you have somebody claiming, you're mentally unstable, and then you pack a gun. So, the video that you were talking about earlier, I have to just make this a point, because I know that the politics behind some of this does play an integral part.
Yes, it does.
Okay. And I have to also tell you that my local legislators have answered all my calls. I'm a very well-connected person. So if I'm struggling through these issues and I know people, I can only imagine what people who don't have resources that they can call on. And legislatively, there are some major issues with how to approach these fallacies within our judicial system, and how to approach them and how to fix them. The shortcomings are potentially life-threatening to people in these types of situations. So this is not something that I'm going to let sit on the back burner. It's not something I intend to be quiet about. It wouldn't be the first time I went and got a permit to protest,
right,
and walk around and bring some notable consequence. This is an election season.
Right.
So what better way to lead a charge and a challenge to those who are seeking and vying for my vote? How do you feel about my issues? It's one of the reasons why I ran, because in the absence of seeing somebody who could articulate my concerns and then come to the table prepared with firsthand knowledge of, where things fall apart and what the fix is, we have to ask that of these people who want to be our voice. We are a republic where we put people in office to represent our voices.
Yes.
So, do your homework on candidates. You can't be swayed by a D, an R, an I. You have to do your homework. You have to know what that person stands for. You have to vote your values and not your party affiliation. That's important.
Yes. Not only is that important, but it's the policies that these people who get in elected office that hurt our communities. These policies aren't things that just happen and it hurts just for 2 or 3 years. These policies can last for generations.
Right.
And if you want change, then you have to change the policies. Let me just talk to you. I think a couple of months ago, I had a show here on mental illness and why people would go and get mental therapy and all that. I have no problem with anybody getting therapy. I have no problem with you seeking professional help to get therapy. What I have a problem is when family members and friends think they're therapists. I have a problem when you think you can fix broken. You can't fix broken. If somebody is broken, you can't fix them. I've seen it in sports. A lot of times, being a black male, and I've been 6'4", 6'5", for most of my life, a teenager. I was 6'2". No, I'm not shrinking yet. I was 6'2". So again, they always thought, I played football, basketball, did all those things, whether it be in the Army or in corrections or NYP, doesn't really matter. I did all those things. And one of the things that I saw was that people were trying to fix broken. Yeah, the guy may be a great basketball player. He may be a great baseball player, but this guy's broken. And when the team got together, they said, well, we want him on our team and we can. No, you can't fix broken. It doesn't work that way. You don't have the credentials. You don't even have the ability. And believe me, I know that some of you are going to tell me, yeah, well, therapy is as important as yes, it is. But therapy is still talk. They can't make you do a damn thing. It's still talk. And too many of our black brothers and sisters think they therapists. You're not therapists. You know that that person was broken. And if they broken, you should not be messing with them. I know we getting ourselves in a lot of trouble when we think we can fix people. You can fix a clock. Fixing people, not that simple. So, you know, I see people always, especially on Instagram, they're always going to diagnose other people. This person has this, they're this, they're that. No, you don't know any of that. You're not a therapist. Stop trying to be a therapist.
Well, I can tell you that the therapy has helped my girls.
There you go. Okay.
And I had to seek out someone that
That's
I
good.
knew that my children could relate to. It's very difficult to find someone that a child can identify with, because you made a point. You know, you have to have somebody that you feel understands you, can relate to you, can identify with you. And for that reason, I sought out a black female for my black daughters. And so this young lady is dynamic. She's not too far displaced to where she can't relate to the relevant cultures. Her husband, he can do his thing musically. So,
Good.
you know, music is a part of their life. And so she was able to establish a rapport, which is important for you to be able to get out of the therapy what is needed. And
that is
so
correct.
my oldest of those two daughters was really struggling with identity issues. She felt bad about herself, you know, from things that she was going on in school. And then this situation on top of that really hurt her a lot. And so it's been wonderful to watch her over the last 4 months start to heal and start to feel good about herself. Look, she has the fake lashes, right? So she puts them on. I'm sorry, baby. She's watching me. Let me put you out on blast. But, you know, she enjoys those things and she feels good about herself. And I said, well, you know, it's okay. We'll let you have that. Right. So, you know, it's really important for you to heal from within. You cannot fix a broken person. I'm trying to remember who it was that said it. Oh, it'll come back to me. It's easier to fix.
Frederick Douglass.
Frederick Douglass.
Yes.
Yes. He says easier to build children than to fix a broken.
Right. Prevention.
Right?
Prevention is number one. It's to keep you grounded on here. And you know, we're a little bit over an hour, but I'm just going to go just a couple of more minutes. And one thing that I want to say is that we will have this conversation again. She will be back here. We're going to do this because we need to get to the heart of why our political system who controls our judicial system is letting people slide through the cracks of this stuff. And quite frankly, in my opinion, and of course in Donyale's opinion, you're going to get people hurt. You're going to get people hurt.
Let me tell you, I've called some very high elected officials who have yet to return my phone call. I won't say names.
Okay. Well, let you. I know we're going to have a city council person on next week. We're going to have Donyale on the week after that one. We're going to have a city council. Plus, I think I have 2 shows next week. But one of the shows that we're going to talk about, and this piggybacks off of here, why are so many clergy, coaches, and teachers sexually abusing children? Do you know why? And I'm going to give you the reason why, and I'm going to answer that right now. It's because the culture that we live in allows it. When you hear people like Nasser out in Michigan who did all those terrible things to our Olympic gymnastics, when we hear about what Jeffrey Epstein was doing, and that they were communicating, they actually, it came out in the Daily News in New York City today that Jeffrey Epstein wrote a letter to Nasser. So these people are all part of the same cabal. And one of the things that I've seen, whether you believe it's in Hollywood or around the country or just political connected people. We have a lot of teachers and a lot of clergy and a lot of people abusing our children because our system, quite frankly, allows it to happen. This has been the Hard Talk with Jakim. Do you want to say anything before we get out of here, Donyale?
One last little piece that I touched on briefly. I made mention that I was accused of waving my firearm in a threatening manner. We have a lot of conversations about permits and all of that. One of the things that I hope that we do is listen to all sides of that conversation, because right now my firearms are the only thing that are protecting me in absence of a judicial system who has put things in place. And so we have to be careful about how we have this conversation. We need to make sure that people are competent to be able to have those firearms, but we also need to not hinder the ability for people who are victims to be able to protect themselves as well.
Victims and legitimate firearm holders who have not committed a crime. If you ever think that the Hard Talk with Jakim is for the Second Amendment 100%, no. If you ever think that I'm against the Second Amendment, no. I think that a lot of our freedom fighters back in the day would have loved to have a firearm when they were being chased by the Ku Klux Klan. So I've owned firearms. I've owned firearms all my life, and I have been a registered Democrat for most of my life. So I'm going to tell you right now, we need what we call common sense gun laws here. We don't need the rhetoric of every gun is bad. It's nothing but a tool, just like a hammer. And yes, you just saw on Instagram, a Chicago bus driver. If you go and find her on Instagram, you probably go to DL Hughley's, and you'll see it. Chicago bus driver did not stop where this young man wanted to stop, and the young man brandished a gun. Or it just happened within 2 weeks. Brandished a gun and told the bus driver, "Stop here." The bus driver said no, but the bus driver went and pulled out a gun, and there was a shootout on the bus. Believe you me, if that bus driver, now he did get arrested for the shootout, but believe you me, if he did not have that firearm, there would have been a dead bus driver there. You can see it right there. So that's where I stand on that, y'all. And y'all know I don't mince any words about that.
When we come back, let's put on the agenda to talk about some of the policies that are legislative proposals at this point about corrections.
Oh, yes.
I have a whole belly full of gripes because some of them are necessary and some of them are hurting. So, again, we need to have the right people at the table to discuss that.
When we do that, I'm going to have my sister Josie Roy on here, and she's been on that correction. Let me tell you something. Once I got out of corrections, man, I avoided it like the plague. I ain't gonna lie to you. I avoided it. But people say, when you get down to Delaware, you didn't want to. No. I did my time. I got something else I got to do. I've done my thing. All right, y'all. That's been the Hard Talk with Jakim Muhammad. Our guest host, Ms. Donyale Hall, was fantastic today. We'll have her back in June. In this month of June, we're going to have a whole bunch of other stuff to talk about. Yes, we will get into all of those things. And if you're suffering from any type of mental illness, I just want y'all to know that go out there and get some help. If you're suffering right now in a abusive relationship with domestic violence issues or intimate partners issue, doesn't matter what it is, go out and get help right now. I'm telling you right now, if you don't go out and get that help right now, you're going to be in a world of hurt. So I'm going to leave you with this. And I'm going to leave you about how I feel about the system. And I think our guest host there, Donyale, feels the same way. This has been the Hard Talk with Jakim show. Peace.
You can get poor working class white people to vote for you, even though your policies will help rich folk, then you've done half the job. If you can get those poor working class white people to believe that their enemies are not rich plutocrats and oligarchs, but the poor brown family that lives next door, then you're on to keeping power. It's a crappy system. but it's bad people in a bad system.
And we will denote that. Bad people in a bad system. Peace.